Hi everyone, welcome to Embodied Art Studio. I'm here in the studio today because it's so hot out, so it's like what a better day to paint than today. And it's just a lovely Sunday for painting, so I'm in here and I wanted to do an underpainting today, and I thought like, gosh, this is like one of my favorite techniques that I always use, like literally always use when I'm painting, so why not share it with everyone else? So if you're into layering with your paints, you're just getting started with painting, and you want to try painting something that has form, meaning it has something that has volume, like if you're painting a person, or even like facial features, that has form. And to do it, you can start out by using an underpainting. So before I explain the essentials of underpainting, why? I love putting things in context, so first of all, we're gonna answer why underpaint. Underpainting settles two things for us. It settles drawing first. You have to draw whatever it is that you're trying to give form to. Usually if it's form, it's something like, you know, it doesn't need to be too complex, but maybe you have to draw a circle if you're practicing with a sphere first. And it also settles value. Value, ooh, let me grab my handy dandy value scale. I'm back. Value is the spectrum of light to dark. So this is a value scale right here. So when light hits something, it's at its lightest moment, and then when it gets towards its shadow, it's at its darkest moment. So when we're doing an underpainting, we're only using one color. Right? And that color will be darkened and lightened to show value. The first place I like to go to is my darkest moments. I find this really grounding because it really gets in those deepest, darkest moments, and also around my edges as well. So that feels really nice. I'm gonna pick up some of my blue, and I'm actually only gonna add maybe like the tiniest bit of water, right? This is my darkest moments, so really I'm not gonna need a lot of water, and I'm actually gonna need several layers of this blue to get it as dark as I really want it. So at first I'm not gonna use any water. I'm just gonna kind of mark off those darkest areas with my blue. So the direction I'm moving my brush right now is just kind of like going along the edges of my lips. So I'm actually just moving with that contour line drawing, which is just the outline of my lips I have here with my charcoal. Right now I'm not really going on the inside of my lips yet, which is that volume that I get with that bottom lip and that top lip, like how they feel rounded. So for now I'm just going along the edges, going with what I know, and kind of like almost like reinforcing the outline, but only where I have really dark moments. So that's what I'm starting with here. I think it's very common that when you have something like the human form, or if you're painting like a still life, an object, that when you go to do this underpainting technique, it does seem like ideal and comforting to just kind of like outline around all your contour lines, but it's not really so that there is an outline around the entire lips where the light is being captured. Like for example, like down in here, or maybe in this top area, we don't have very many dark shadows around the contour line. So you want to be careful where we're putting darks. It is like, I know it's so fun to just like reinforce your lines, then you can really see your lips. You have it in there nice and dark, but it's not really so that we have shadow all the way around our lips. So just being careful to just like not overdo this bit here. So as I'm going and I'm realizing that it looks good in terms of like where my darks are around my lips, I'm going to start coming in side my lips, and now I'm gonna really pay attention to how I'm moving my brush. So I wanted to talk about that too, because moving your brush can really be empowering if you know how to move it. So what I want to talk about right now is contour line, cross contour lines rather. So when you have, my favorite little analogy is like if I had a little ant and it dipped into paint and it walked straight across my surface here. what kind of line would that leave behind? Because my lips are rounded, it's not gonna leave a straight line. An ant walking straight across my bottom lips wouldn't leave a straight line. However, it would leave a slightly curved line. Now this is just the bottom half of the lip, so I'm just kind of like curving it a little bit, but as it gets towards the top, as my little ant dipped in paint gets towards the top of my bottom lip here, it's gonna start to curve in that opposite direction. And I'm having these shadow moments in here. I'm not using any water yet. I'm just getting my darkest moments in here. Going in my top lip, this is an even better example. My ant would actually just curve like so, all the way. He's traveling up and down. And I'm gonna keep going with just my darkest moments inside my lips here. Now as I get towards my left side, what's happening is my curves are mirroring each other. We're getting towards the other section of our lips, so it's rounding in the opposite direction. So we want to make sure that our curves are mirroring our curves on the other side of our lips. Okay, so I'm just about done with all of my dark. Sometimes I like to kind of stop before I take it a little too far because, again, that's really easy to do. So now I want to start bringing in other values besides my dark blue and besides just my white. So how we're going to do that is we're going to water down our paint so that we can see more white in the canvas. So we're going to get a lighter blue when we water down our paint. So I want to show a gradient up here at the top. A gradient is that smooth transition from dark to light, and we're going to try and achieve that in our lips just using the dark blue paint and water. So I'm going to clean out my brush, use clean water, and I'm going to start inside of my blue splotch that I just made here, and I'm going to start to pull it out with that clean water. And what's happening is I'm going to clean my brush again, use clean water, gonna go like halfway in what I just did and pull it out again. And what's happening is I'm using the paint that's already on my canvas, and I'm using it to like slowly like pull it out and get a lighter value. So it is like light is traveling from shadow to where the light is directly hitting. And sometimes I like to go all the way back and just kind of smooth it out a little bit more. Kind of like show that journey of light. Because this is how light travels. So now that I know that this is the technique I'm going to use, this is called pulling paint. Practice it first, definitely, if you don't feel comfortable with it, but that's what we're going to go for. We've marked off our shadows. We haven't like quite marked off where our lightest values are going to be, but I want you to have an idea before you start pulling the paint towards your light. But we've created kind of like a start point for ourselves. So I usually like to wait for the paint to dry here. If it's not dry, just hit it with a blow dryer. So as I mentioned before, I want my darks to be a little bit darker. That first layer like never really quite cuts it for me. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna relayer my darkest areas. Maybe I start in like the deepest, darkest corner of my lips here. I'm relayering it. It had to be dry before I did it. Make sure that I can move my brush like across my cross contours, especially if you want it to be darker. You could start cross hatching a little bit. But as I get close to where I'm going to start to pull the paint, I'm going to go back to moving it in that same direction. I really want my lips to feel like they're rounded up here, and this is really going to help. My brush strokes really, really help. Okay. So I want to make sure my paint is still wet. I want you to, if you're doing this, I want you to take note of where the light is coming from. You can see it's kind of like shining on the top of my lips right here. So I want to start moving kind of towards this light source over here. We may not get there quickly, but that's okay. All right, so I'm going to use my clean brush. I'm going to play around with the water that's on my brush here. That's on my canvas, rather. Now it's on my brush. I'm going to start to pull it out at that darkest moment and get some mid-tones. Mid-tones are those values that are right in the middle, those grays. So you can see now that this is a really hard edge, right? In a gradient, we don't have a hard edge. And you might get this at first when you're starting to pull out the paint, but if it's still wet, you can go ahead and just take a little bit of paint and try and soften that edge by getting a value that fits right in between those two values. So when you have a hard edge, it means that you're missing a value in between. And maybe that just takes a couple layers for you to smooth it out. But in that first layer, you can go in, and if you can find that value, it's a little bit in between, and kind of squeeze it in there, make friends between those two values, you can start to get a little bit of a smoother gradient. All right, I'm gonna keep working. I'm gonna keep pulling my paint out of these shadows towards its light source to try and start to show form here. That's our goal, is we're trying to give our lips dimension. We're trying to make it feel like it has volume, like it could pop off the canvas. So let's keep moving with that pulling of the paint and making gradients in every little section. Having a paper towel nearby is really great if you go too far. Because this is such a watery technique, you can actually kind of like wet your paper towel and kind of scoop it right off. And sometimes that actually helps blend the paint a little bit, kind of like smooths it out. So know that if it's still wet, it's okay if you go a little bit too far with your values. You can always just kind of pull it back with the paper towel, which I have just demonstrated. Now with the cross contours, an ant doesn't just have to walk across one way, it can walk across the other way as well. So when you start to think about like how an ant would move in this direction, how would it move? And usually, if you're actually really close to an edge, usually what will happen is that your brush will like move kind of like mimicking that edge. So I'm actually like parallel to this like middle corner or middle bit of the lips here. So I can start to move my brush this way as well. I went for these lips because they were just like so voluptuous and had so much form to them and were so pretty, and the contrast was just beautiful as well. But I'm just curious. You comment below if you're gonna do something on a face, like some type of facial feature to try this underpainting technique. I want you to comment below what facial feature you would do first. And it could even be hair. I've done an underpainting for a whole body and a whole face before. So what would you try out for your very first time? Would it be lips or would it be something different? Okay, so I'm at a point where I'm no longer actually pulling the paint out from my darkest value that's on my canvas, that's wet. I'm now going to revisit any values that need to be smoothed out. So two values that could use a value in between. So what I can actually do now is I can just water down the blue on my palette and create really light values this way. Right, so I'm just gonna water it down, and it's actually kind of hard to tell like how dark or how light it's gonna be, and you really don't know until you kind of put it down on your lips. So just have your paper towel nearby in case you go too dark, and if you go too light, oh well, you can always just pick up a little bit more paint and add it on there while it's still wet. So it's actually safer to go a little bit lighter than it is to go too dark. But either way, you're safe, go for it. I want you to smooth out your gradients, fill in anything that needs to be darker. Make sure not to get rid of your white space. Like that's really important. My students, some of them just get like really excited because this underpainting technique is so much fun. It's actually like really zen to like play around with water in your paint. So make sure you don't get too ahead of yourself. Make sure you leave that beautiful white space that we need to get that really nice contrast to make our lips pop. But go ahead and smooth out anything that needs to be smoothed out to finish up this underpainting. I hope everyone enjoyed the underpainting technique that I have offered today. If you're interested in putting color on top of these lips, learning more about how to make a shadow color, how to get highlight colors, and how to blend them on top of your underpainting, subscribe to our page, Embodied Art Studio, and ring the bell. Make sure you ring the bell to get alerts for what's coming up next, and that way you won't miss out on our next video about putting color on top of these lips. So again, my name is Shannon, and this is Embodied Art Studio, and thanks for joining us today.